Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome in the all-new Audi A6 e-tron, which means this is the all-electric A6. Now in this video I'm going to show you everything you need to know about this car. I'm going to show you the interior and the exterior, and we're going to take the car out for a drive. Let's kick this video off by talking about the competitors of this car, because Audi is pretty much the last German manufacturer to introduce an electric sedan and estate like this car. Because back in 2022 Mercedes-Benz introduced the EQE, and at the start of 2024 BMW introduced the i5 and the i5 Touring, so the electric version of the new 5 Series. And only now Audi is introducing an electric version of the A6. This car will come as a Sportback and also as an Avant. Obviously today we're driving the Avant, so the station version. The sedan version isn't really a sedan version, and Audi is calling it a Sportback version, which means that it's like a combination of a hatchback and a sedan. So you get a very sloping roofline on the sedan. So that means that the Sportback version, so let's still call it the sedan version, is a lot more practical than the outgoing sedan version of the A6 with a petrol engine, because the liftback has a really big trunk opening. So that means that even in a Sportback version you'll be able to fit like a big mountain bike if you fold down the back seat area. Now obviously in this big Avant version that's no problem at all, because as standard you get 500 liters of trunk capacity, which is the same trunk capacity as the Sportback version as well, by the way. But obviously this Avant version doesn't have a sloping roofline, so it's a little bit easier to stack up a little bit higher in the trunk area. And if you fold down the backseat area in this Avant version, you get 1400 liters of storage capacity. And this electric A6 can also tow. Maybe that's important to you. This car can tow up to 2100 kilos, which is very impressive for an electric car. But more important on this car, and even more impressive on this car, is the range and the charging speed. Well, let's kick off by the range. This car is available with two battery sizes, either 83 kilowatt hours or 100 kilowatt hours. Net capacity is 79 kilowatt hours and 95 kilowatt hours. If you go for the small battery pack, you will have a range of 625 kilometers WLTP, and if you go for the 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, you will have a range of 765 kilometers, which is very impressive and a lot better compared to the i5 and also compared to the EQE. And according to Audi, that's because this car is very slippery, very aerodynamic. This is the most aerodynamic car that Audi has ever produced. It has an air drag coefficient of 0.21, 0.21, so very impressive indeed. And according to Audi, the drivetrain is extremely efficient. Now if you want to have the optimal range in this car, you have to go obviously for the biggest battery pack, but also for the rear wheel drive option, so the single motor on the rear axle, because you can get this car with quattro as well, so 4-wheel drive as well. Now there are basically 4 power figures. If you go for the entry-level version with the smaller battery pack, you get a single motor on the rear axle producing 286 horsepower. You can also get a single motor on the rear with 386 horsepower as well, in combination with the big battery pack. And that's the version I'm driving today, which is called the E6 e-tron Avant, if you go for the Avant Performance. And performance doesn't mean you get extra horsepower, although this car is definitely not a slouch with 367 horsepower, but performance basically means you get the optimal range. Now you also have to go for the smaller wheels. You can get 19-inch wheels as standard, but also 20 and 21 inch as well, but you have to go for the smaller wheels if you want to have the biggest range, obviously. You also have to go for the optional digital wing mirrors, so you don't get regular mirrors, but you get cameras on the side, and then you get like a little screen. They give you like an extra 7 or 10 kilometers on a full range, but you need all these things to get the optimal range. Now obviously if you don't get all these things, you still have a pretty good range. You probably end up with like 700 kilometers on paper, because obviously in reality it will be a little bit less than the WLTP figures. I'm pretty sure this car will do 500 to 600 kilometers in actual real world conditions. But it's pretty hard to tell today, because today I'm able to drive the car for the very first time. But today we are driving the car on Tenerife. It is the end of November, but the sun is still up. It's like 24 degrees and there aren't pretty much any highways on Tenerife. So it's pretty hard to tell what the actual range on this car will be. However, I will be trying this car out later back in my home country of the Netherlands. I'm gonna drive this car on the highway on higher speeds in rougher weather with rain, snow and winds, and then we can actually tell what the range on this car will be. But I'm pretty sure the car will be able to do at least 400-600 kilometers, 400 kilometers in winter, and 500 or 600 kilometers in spring, autumn and summer. Then let's do a quick walk around the car. Now as you can see, the car looks very much like an Audi A6. The main difference compared to the outgoing model is probably the headlight situation. This car has very pointy, sharp and aggressive looking daylight running lights, and it almost looks like the daylight running lights are the actual headlights, but they aren't. They're just the daylight running lights, and the actual headlights are integrated just a little bit lower, and you can really only see them when the headlights are turned on. And they have done this deliberately, obviously, so the car looks a lot more aggressive. Now you still get the single frame grille on this car, just like on any other Audi A6, but obviously the grille on this car is not really functional and is completely closed off. You also get a frunk on this car, or a fruit, depending on where you're from. So a front trunk or a front boot. And it's really easy to open the bonnet. You don't have to use a latch down here in the footwell, but you can just simply slide your hand over the bonnet and then it will automatically open, which is a pretty cool feature. And the fruit has a capacity of 27 liters, so it's not super big, but you can store your charging cables if you really try to. Now the charging speed on this car is also pretty impressive. This car can charge up to 270 kilowatts, which is almost the best in class. You also have like the cars from Lotus and Xpeng as well. They can charge up to 400 kilowatts. Porsche can fast charge as well, but 270 kilowatts is pretty impressive for a car in this segment. And again, it's better than a BMW i5 or Mercedes-Benz EQE. Now you can fast charge up to 310 kilometers in only 10 minutes, which again is pretty impressive. And you only need 20 minutes to charge from 10% up to 80%. Then let's talk a little bit more about the power options on this car. Like I said, the entry-level version of this car has 286 horsepower. You can also get the version I'm driving today with rear-wheel drive with 367 horsepower. If you go for the Quattro versions, you get a standard 428 horsepower. But you can also get an S version, so an extra sporty version, which has 503 horsepower. If you go for the S6, you will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 3.6 seconds. If you go for the entry-level version with only 286 horsepower, you will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 6 seconds flat. And if you go for the version I'm driving today, it will take you 5.4 seconds. Now the car I'm driving today is probably the sweet spot, especially if you don't need Quattro, if you don't live in like a snowy area or a hilly area. You're probably better off by using this car, because this car is more efficient with only rear-wheel drive, and this car is plenty powerful with 367 horsepower. Again, 5.4 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour. Yeah, this car feels pretty fast, definitely not slow. And again, you can have the optimal range if you go for this version. Now obviously, if you like to have a little bit more power and a little bit more grip, do go for the Quattro version. I haven't driven that car. I will drive that car later on as well. Now obviously an Audi A6 wouldn't be an Audi A6 if there wasn't an Audi RS6 version. Now The RS6 version e-tron will come out, but the specifications aren't out yet, so I can't tell you anything about that version. I'm guessing that version will definitely have 600 horsepower, but probably a little bit more, probably somewhere between 600 and 700 horsepower, and obviously it will get a different suspension setup. Now for now you can get adaptive suspension on this car, and you can make this car feel a little bit more sporty or a little bit more comfortable depending on the drive modes you're going for. Now down here there's a drive select button, and if I press it, I can go for balanced mode or comfort or efficiency or dynamic. Now obviously if you go for dynamic you get a little bit more horsepower, you get the full power output, and then the suspension will stiffen up a little bit, making the car drive a little bit more dynamic. And basically this electric A6 almost drives just like any other A6, except from the fact that obviously the drivetrain is completely different, and you get instant torque, and the car is a lot more quiet, and it feels a lot faster than a regular A6. But the feel of this car, the suspension setup, doesn't feel much different compared to an A6 with a petrol engine. So that means the car is pretty dynamic, but not insanely dynamic. An A6 has never been super dynamic. Even the RS6 is not really like track focused or super sporty. It's very powerful, but it's not the best handling car. But it also means that this car is very suitable for day-to-day use. And let's be honest, the A6 is aimed at families that want to use this car for their day-to-day groceries, going to work, and also do big road trips when you go on a holiday. And that means that this car is very comfortable and also very suitable for long journeys and long road trips, especially if you go for the big battery, because then you can just drive for 500 or 600 kilometers without having to stop. Now the A6 is also being known as being very business-like, and this new version is no exception. You can really tell here in the interior, you got a very minimalistic interior, very business-like indeed. You do get better materials than in the outgoing model. You get this very soft materials on the door panel, and also here on the dashboard as well. It almost looks a little bit like a Volvo, because in Volvos you also get these soft materials in the dashboard as well. And I really like that. It looks a little bit less business-like compared to the outgoing models. It's a little bit warmer compared to the outgoing models. You do still get some glossy black plastic here on the center console, which scratches really easily. I'm never a big fan of glossy black plastic, but however, you still get it in this car. You also get a massive screen in front of you, or actually two massive screens. They are a bit curved, just like in a BMW i5 for example. And I really like these screens. Again, they're pretty big and there's a lot of compute power, so they're pretty snappy and they're easy to operate. You do however get a lot of menus and sub-menus, just like on the BMW i5 and the BMW and the Mercedes-Benz EQE. And that's because this is a premium car with a lot of options. You get mood lighting, so you get a mood lighting menu on the infotainment system. There's a big panoramic roof. It's a solar bay panoramic roof. That's what they like to call it, I believe, at Audi. Which means that there's no cover, but you can just make it transparent. If I hit the button down here, you can see the roof will automatically turn transparent, which also is a pretty quirky and pretty cool option on this car. It is an option. You do have to pay extra on this car. You can also get another second screen in front of the passenger seat, which again is an option. It's a pretty cool option if you're gonna do road trips and you always have a passenger next to you, because the passenger can use that screen as their own infotainment system, but you can also use it to watch Netflix and YouTube, for example, which can be a very nice feature when you're doing longer trips. Now when the car is not moving, as a driver you'll be able to see the screen. When you start driving the car, the screen will automatically turn black for me, only for the driver, not for the passenger seat. I believe there's some sort of film layer on top of the screen, and the film layer will turn transparent when the car comes to a halt, and it will make sure the screen is black when the car starts to drive. Then let's end with the pricing. I only know the prices for the Dutch market, but the pricing will not be much different compared to other European countries. Now in the Netherlands the car will start from 64,000 euros. I believe in Germany it will be like 1,000 euro cheaper. If you go for the Avant version will be like 1,600 euros more expensive in Germany on the entire range. So no matter what version you go for. Now if you go for the bigger battery pack, you have to pay at least 76,000 euros. And if you go for the S version with 500 horsepower, you have to pay around 100,000 euros. And let's not forget, even if you go for the entry-level version of this car, if you start to tick boxes on this car, so if you start to go for options on this car, and there are a whole lot of options on this car, for example, the solar bay roof and also the OLED option, so you can get OLED lighting on this car as well, which is a very nice feature but pretty expensive. The price will raise dramatically, so this car can easily become very expensive when you start to tick boxes. But in the end, you will end up with a very nice car, because I'm very much impressed by this car, especially with the range. Again, we have to check later what the actual range on this car will be, but I'm pretty sure this car is very efficient. So far I'm doing around 13-14 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometers, and I'm driving around the mountains, so that's very impressive so far. So do let me know what you think about this car. Would you go for this car or a BMW i5 or Mercedes-Benz EQE? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this in the future. For now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.